Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the NRW. I'm your host, Rob Medina, and I thank you all very much for joining me here today because today I'm going to be reviewing the movie White Elephant. Now, this is the first film that Jesse has released after which I believe to be his best movie, In Hell Hath No Fear, which I saw last year, which came out last year, I should say. And I loved what he did in that movie. There's so much about the film that I love that I went on to great details about in my review for that film last year here on the channel. So I was really excited to see what he was going to be following up with that film. And we ended up getting White Elephant. Now, I will be honest and say, this isn't my favorite Jesse V. Johnson film, but it is a very good film. I did enjoy this movie, but I had to go back and watch this movie 5 different times because the movie came out last week on June 3rd. It came out in theaters and it's also available on AMC Plus, and you can also rent it and buy it on Amazon. So I rented this movie on Amazon on June 3rd, but didn't watch it until June 4th. And when I saw the film for the first time, I remember there's certain things that just didn't click with me. Not because I thought the movie was not getting good. It is good, but I just noticed certain things that I felt was missing for me personally. So I had to go back and watch the film again to reanalyze certain things that I may have missed along the way that I noticed the second time around, the third, fourth, and fifth time around that not only helped me make me like the film more and appreciate the film a lot more, but I felt like there were certain things that were missing that having coming off of Hell Hath No Fury, which I thought was a great movie, that everything worked, in my opinion, in that movie, that what Jesse had worked so hard on everyone else in Hell Hath No Fury. I know for a fact they worked very hard on this movie, but I felt like something was missing, that when I saw the film again, I was kind of picking up on that there might have been some scenes that were left out just for the sake of the pacing of the film that I thought were very integral, that if it was ever shot, why they were taken down to begin with here is beyond me. But I'll get more into that with my review here for you to understand where I'm coming from with that here. But I will also say too that I will not get into any spoilers is what I meant to say. I will not get into any spoilers here because I think as you watch the movie, the way that things start to play itself out, as you watch it, it makes more sense not knowing a lot about it until the story progresses along the way for you to really get a deeper understanding of what these characters are going through and understand the journey that much more. At least that's how it was for me, and I hope it will have the same effect on you as well. But I will get into my the plot synopsis, the positives, the negatives, and then my rating. When 2 cops witness an assassination attempt, a ruthless crime boss orders Gabriel Tancredi, an ex-Marine turned mob enforcer, to eliminate any and all threats. With an eager underling out to prove himself, rival gangs making moves, and a rising body count, every step Tancredi makes threaten lives, including his own. And that right there is a film in a nutshell. So now let's get into my positives. My first positive with this film does have to do with the story in itself. There's a wonderful sequence in the movie that Michael Rooker, who plays the character of Gabriel Tancredi, the main hero in this film, he has a conversation with John Malkovich's character, who plays a lawyer in this movie, which I won't reveal his connection to the overall story, but it's a very integral one too. But there is something about that particular conversation, although a short one, and a very important one, I would say more or less the halfway point of the film, that gives some insight about where the story more or less kind of gets inspired from here, I would say. I know Jesse had revealed, and I forgot off the top of my head here where this story more or less kind of got inspired from, but there was a lot of comparisons to, an analogy for a Greek story that Malkovich's character was sharing with Michael Rooker's character in Gabriel Tancredi, that pretty much gives you the idea of what the direction the story is taking on here, that I thought was very beautifully done, in my opinion, in giving that sort of analogy of what you can expect out of this film. And there was a certain metaphor that came with it that I started to appreciate more upon my second and third, fourth, fifth viewing of the film, that started to become more clear to me along the way upon repeat viewing, that I didn't necessarily click with right away the first time I saw the film. And that's the beautiful thing about Jesse's movies, that the more you go watch it, at least for me personally, there's a lot more you take away from it here, where you can really understand what he's trying to go for here. And it's a quite intelligent, in my opinion, in how he uses these type of stories to infuse in the narrative that we're watching here, that works so effectively, in my opinion. So having seen the conversation between Malkovich and Rooker's characters, where there's talks about how the Greeks didn't have a police force and how they're going to be able to determine who had committed a crime, to go and have this one individual pay for their crimes, if you will. There's a wonderful story about that and how basically criminals are the worst, their own worst enemies, that they're pretty much their own downfall. And that's very much the case here in this movie. Without getting into spoilers, I'm sure when you watch the film, you understand what I'm referring to here. But what I also started to appreciate too is that the actors in this movie and helping carry in the story do a phenomenal job in showcasing some sides of their abilities that you may have noticed before, but given the time that you have to be able to focus on them and following their journey, you're definitely going to see different sides of these actors, especially in this case with Michael Rooker, who is someone that I've known about for years, you know, with films he's done in the past, like Henry the Serial Killer, I think is what it's called, if I remember correctly, the name of that movie, which I've only seen once. Of course, Cliffhanger. He's done a bunch of other movies as well too, with Jean-Claude Van Damme, The Marine 2, which I thoroughly enjoyed. You know, a lot of people didn't like it, but I thought it was a fun movie. And of course, the Guardian of the Galaxy films too. But this particular movie, in my opinion, does a really good job in showcasing, without hearing a lot about his story, the first opening shots when you get to see him, where he's visiting his wife's grave, more or less, in the opening shot of the film, you can figure it out right then and there, at least for me, upon repeat viewing, when I started to seeing the whole story and go back and revisiting that opening shot. That right there is pretty much indicating for you where he's at that point of his life, where you can pretty much figure out that he is at that point where he just wants to step away from it all here and is more or less training someone to take over his position so that way he can go off and live his life and actually pursue something that has a lot more meaning for him and also for his wife as well too, who has passed away. And he was celebrating his wife's birthday, and clearly there's a lot of connection that he has with her, a lot of love that he still has for her, that he doesn't want to miss that important day, even though she's no longer here with him, but he still very much is honoring her memory. And there, you start to learn that along the way as the story progresses. There you can clearly see there's a lot more depth about this character that Rooker brings out of him, that it's not done through dialogue in a lot of ways. It's more through the body language and his reaction to certain situations, where he's still very much loyal to the mob boss played by Bruce Willis, but he's in that line where he's deciding on when he's going to start stepping away from it here. And when he gets to that point, everything that leads up to that moment makes a lot of sense, why he makes the decision kind of abruptly, and all of a sudden everyone's reaction to why he's making the decision, and they feel the betrayal for him doing that, and yet trying to communicate with him, and now I wouldn't say try to work it out, but give him the ultimatum: either you do this here or you're done. And he understands the consequences that are going to be coming with that as well too. And I think Rooker does a really good job in showcasing that. And the fact is that I didn't know this about him as well, because Jesse has shared this in the past in a previous interview, where Michael Rooker is very well versed in martial arts. I forgot what style of martial arts he's versed in, but this is a guy who can definitely carry his own when it comes to the physicality, and you definitely get to see that in this movie. And I thought he was phenomenal in doing that here, but just providing a certain complexity about the character, that you know where he's coming from, but as it progresses along the way, you get to see that complexity expand a little bit here, where he's almost in auto mode when he comes to doing what he's expected to do. And then when he has a moment to breathe and reflect on certain things, that's where he's changing the system, if you will, where he's no longer going to abide by these guidelines anymore that he's been accustomed, and other people have been accustomed to him doing, where he's going to be doing his own thing. And now he knows he's got an uphill battle along the way that he's got to overcome here. I thought that was done brilliantly, in my opinion. The other actor that I want to point out here too in the story is someone that I was actually kind of almost prejudgmental about it the very first time I saw this character in the movie, and that has to do with the actor who I'm going to butcher his name if I don't read the name properly here. It's Vahir Derbez. This was somebody that I was not familiar with here, and then I come to find out that I actually did see a movie that he was in, I think over 10 years ago, if I recall correctly, in a movie called How to Be a Latin Lover. So I did see that movie once a long time ago, and I remember enjoying it, but I don't remember him in the movie. But he was in the film, so I do have seen a movie that he's done before, but I just don't remember him in the movie so much because I've only seen the film once. But I think I recall enjoying the film. But the point I'm getting at is that I think when I first saw this character, I was quick to judge for a minute that he was going to be a very standard, cocky, kind of a chauvinistic type of guy. And that's kind of what I was expecting firsthand. But then as the story progresses along the way, you start to understand that there is a lot more to this character, that you come to realize that he's not necessarily all those things. Yes, he does have those qualities about him where he's cocky. He's obviously a very good looking guy. He's clearly the ladies like him. You get to see a little bit of that in the movie as well too. but there's a certain presence about him as well too, that you don't look at him as a threat right away, but there's a certain commanding presence that he has about him when it's required, and then when there's a moment where he has to just stay still and take a step back and let other people, do their jobs, and he's got to be there and make sure they get their job done before he takes on his steps here to finish out what he needs to do. I thought that he did a really good job in showcasing that balancing act there, but never intruding in that respect, where he wasn't just some hothead just blowing shit up. He wasn't like that at all. In fact, he was a lot more stable than that, because I was in the impression he was going to be one of those loose cannon type of guys, and that's not really the case at all, which is what I appreciate about this story and what I appreciate about him as an actor in that character that he portrayed here. So as a result of his performance in that movie, I became a fan of him, having seen what he'd done in his film, because there's a lot more to the character story, especially when it comes to relationship that the character he plays in Carlo that he has with Michael Rooker's character in Gabriel, where they haven't been working with each other for that long, but the amount of time they have worked with each other, they definitely have earned their respect to some degree. And even though they have disagreements about certain things along the way, and you get to see that as they converse with each other, but you can still see that they mutually have a great amount of respect for each other, and to the point where you can clearly see when Carlo is had supposed to be handling responsibility that didn't really go according to plan, and Rooker's character is like, "Don't worry, I'll take care of it," and because he knows that the guy Carlo would be doing his due diligence to try to patch up the situation. But of course, Rooker knows he has got to be overseen and make sure that everything stays on course. And you get to see that there is a sense of respect that Carlo has for Gabriel because of what he's doing to look out for him, and at the same time, allowing him to do what he needs to do the job done well, I should say. I actually love that part of the story that I thought worked very effectively, so that when things unfold the way they do at the end of the film, it's you get to see that there is a hard choice that they have to make, but it's a choice that they make that they know that these were the consequences if they go down this path together here. So that's something that I thought was handled quite beautifully under the direction of Jesse V. Johnson. Now, here's what I also want to point out too about the other main character here, and played by Olga Korelenko, who I gotta give her a lot of props to her, because this was an actress that I'm very familiar with here from the previous films that come in the past with her, where she was a James Bond girl in Quantum of Solace. But a lot of times, if I recall correctly, some films that I've seen her in, she's kind of played a lot of these like sexy characters. She's clearly a very attractive woman. And sometimes you see a lot of these sexy female characters that she plays that has a certain complexity about them, but there's not enough room for her to expand on those type of roles, with the exception, I would say, of Quantum of Solace, among other films as well, where she definitely does showcase a lot of her strengths, I would say. But this movie, I remember the second time I saw the film, I remember not once it ever crossed my mind that this is a beautiful woman who's playing a badass. To me, she was just a good character, a very well-written character. And there are certain things about the character that I'm going to kind of point out in my negatives here that I wish we got more out of here. But what we get out of this, out of Olga's performance in this film, you get enough to understand what's going on with her. She's clearly struggling with a lot of things, of PTSD, if I recall correctly, and she definitely has surrounded herself with a lot of great support around her. In this case, with an actor played by Joseph Cannon, who I'll be talking about in a little bit here, that has been able to support her in whatever she needs to be able to keep stability, and then along the way give her some straightforward advice and not bullshitting her, but at the same time give her the space to be able to figure things out for herself, which is something that I think has, when you see that relationship that she has with Joseph Cannon's character, it's clearly obvious that they've been through a lot with each other and they respect each other a great deal, but he also understands to give her space and not push her to the edge, because he knows that she's at a point where she needs the time to develop the skills to be able to overcome these hurdles that she's dealing with here with herself. That I wish we got more of that, but I kind of jumping into negatives here a little bit, but there was hints of that, parts of the relationship that I thought was done so well that I remember wanting to see more of here. But again, I'm kind of jumping ahead here with regards to the negative. But the reason I'm bringing this up now is because there's a certain quality about that relationship that you see that she has with Joseph's character and some of the other characters along the way too, that you start to realize that this is a person that is expecting the worst out of people, and therefore she's always on the edge, and she's trying to do something with her life to take out the bad guys according to the law, and helping her get a peace of mind out of that as well too. And she definitely does touch upon that in the film, especially when she has a conversation with Michael Rooker's character in the movie. That I thought was really well done, in my opinion. Here's two things I want to point out here to kind of highlight two actors that I want to give props to, because there's a lot of great performances that we get in this movie too, with a lot of veteran Jesse Lee Johnson actors. The first one to point out here is going to be Luke Lafontaine, who plays the character of Lafontaine in the movie. This is a man who's been with Jesse for a number of years, doing stunt work, fight choreography, acting, among other things as well too. And when I had a conversation with Jesse last year on my show, You're So Cool, Jesse did point out that he felt bad that Luke always got the bitter end of the stick when it came to his production, because he's either being shot at, blown up, stabbed, pushed around. I mean, this guy's got like the worst gig at times when it comes to his job that he does with Jesse. But he's always done very well. And I'm kind of joking when I say this here, so I don't want to get the impression that Jesse treats him like shit. That's not what I'm pointing out here. But it's important for me to highlight that when I saw Hell Hath No Fury, I thought Luke's performance in that film was so good. Seeing him in this role, he doesn't do a whole lot, but there's certain things about his performances, the character that he portrays in Lafontaine in this movie, that I really love. And there's just little subtle details that I've taken away from them. For me, made me appreciate him more of an actor, as an actor, I should say. And in this one scene in the movie in particular, I remember the conversation that Jesse had shared with me that Luke gets kind of the worst end of the stick. He literally gets slapped hard in the face by Rooker in the movie. And yet he kept his composure. He still is staying in the character and doing the scene justice, doing that interaction with the character of Gabriel justice. So that way, when you saw that slap in the face, it wasn't just a slap in the face for sort of sake of slapping in the face. There was a meaning behind, there was a complexity behind, and there was certainly a purpose for that. And Luke, I thought, in my opinion, did a really good job receiving it. And then you're seeing how this man is kind of treated, because he was expected to do something and didn't do his job, or at least didn't do his job as well, I should say. And he's being held accountable for it. But that one little moment, in my opinion, showcases what this guy is like in a nutshell. And I think that for some reason, that scene really spoke to me about him, where you get to see what this character, his relationship that he has with everybody in the mob, if you will, that's being run by Bruce Willis's character. So the other actor that I'm going to point out here is with Joseph Cannon. Joseph Cannon, for me, is an actor that I've started to appreciate a lot more and more when I see him in Jesse's films, especially after his performance in Hell Hath No Fury, which I loved his scenes that he had with Charles Faddy. I thought that was one of the best things about the movie. Quite frankly, the whole film was fantastic, but that scene that he has with Faddy was phenomenal. And you definitely still get a lot of moments like that where he's providing a wonderful set of wisdom, where you get to see that this is a guy who's clearly been through a lot with the character that Olga Korelenko plays in the movie, and yet somehow found a way to maintain a sense of stability. But it's something about his performance in this film that I started to think, which I will point out my negatives here. Well, I guess I can start with it now, but not that I'm going to be jumping the negatives anytime soon at this point. But I think that his character, in my opinion, was so integral that there was a lot more that I felt like was missing about this character, because without revealing what happens in the end, something happens in the end that you see him and I'm wondering, where did this come from? So to me, that I felt like there was something that was missing about this particular character and how integral and how connected he is to the story than what we initially got in this cut of the film. So I'm sure there's a number of different things that may have been shot that may have been taken out for the sake of time. Who knows if the scene didn't work out as well they anticipated? Who knows? But the point I'm getting at is that it's clearly obvious that this character offers something a lot more than what we just got on the screen that I felt like was missing. But again, I don't mean to jump in my negatives now about this here, but I'm kind of pointing this as a positive because his presence in the movie was, at least for me, it was felt, and it was very integral, that I felt like something was missing. But again, I'm kind of jumping ahead here. So I want to give a shout out to both Luke and Joseph on their performance here, because I thought they did a fantastic job in the movie. I want to give a shout out to Sean Murray, who's the composer of this movie. Sean, I've had on my show, You're So Cool, earlier this year, I meant to say, where we did talk about the scoring to this film, where he was really excited about it. He was very proud of here too. And I will say that, in my opinion, I think the best parts of the movie when it came to the scoring came in the more more quieter moments in the film, because that's where you really felt the impact of the music to help complement that scene. That's the one thing about this film that I remember enjoying the most, is not so much the action sequences, but more the quieter character moments. That's what I took away the most from this film. But when Sean added those the score to those sequences in the movie where you have these character moments where the characters are just conversing with each other, or Rooker's character is just reflecting on something, you hear the music in the background playing, I thought that was done very effectively. And to me, those were one of the best things about the movie, that I thought you get to really learn more about the characters just by the body language, and having the music in the background play to add on to that scene, to complement the scene. I thought it was done very effectively, in my opinion. Now, here's one thing I will say about the movie that I more or less kind of hinted at before, is that I think that the action sequences in this movie were done phenomenally. But those weren't the things that I loved about the movie. I mean, I did love the action sequence. I'm not saying they weren't good. They were fantastic, but those were the things I remember the most about the film, believe it or not. But when the action sequences do occur, I felt like the build up to that worked so well, because you had the time to invest with the characters, so that when you have that big payoff with those action sequences, it was effective. And I'll be honest, I remember when I saw certain shootout sequences that occur in the film, the first thing that crossed my mind, and I'm not sure if it's intentional, but at least it seemed that way for me, but that it reminded me a lot of Will Kaufman's movie. So for those who are not familiar with William Kaufman, if you look at a movie, say, for example, like The Brave, Daylight Sin, Sinners and Saints, what's another film, Jarhead 3, like, when it comes to Will Kaufman's shootout scenes, they are some of the absolute best I've ever seen. I think he is that good when it comes to compositing all the shots together. And when I saw those sequences in this movie, it reminded me a lot of Will Kaufman's approach. I'm not sure if that's intentional, with that Jesse was trying to accomplish here. I'm not saying that that's the case here, but if it was, I felt that influence there. But if it wasn't, then I apologize. But I certainly did feel that was something that I noticed right away when I saw those shootout scenes. I remember the first thing that crossed my mind is Will Kaufman, because I think Will Kaufman does a phenomenal job with the shootout sequences, and I saw a lot of that in those scenes when you get in this movie that I thought worked very effectively for me personally. So, I mean, there's a lot more to this movie that I certainly can point out here that I definitely want to delve into here, but some of those things that I want to point out here are definitely in that spoiler territory. So that's going to be the end of my positives here. So now let's get into my negatives. My first negative with this movie does have to do with I felt like some of the story beats and character beats that were missing in this film. Because when I saw the movie for the first time, I remember the first thing that crossed my mind was that, as far as the negatives are concerned, is that I felt like something was missing. Not to say the story was not any good, because it was a great story, but when you have certain times with characters and you have a certain build up to certain aspect about their background or the current situation that they're in, sometimes I felt like that it was leading to somewhere, and then all of a sudden it just kind of stayed put, and then we get something else to kind of just more or less make up for that loss, that gap, if you will, to just quickly explain what's going on and move on to the next beat. I felt like that was kind of the case here for me with certain character beats and story beats that came along the way. So to give an example, with Olga Korelenko's character in Vanessa, she was somebody that you come to learn has PTSD. And there's certain moments where you get to see that she's clearly on the edge, and people are commentating about that with her, and she's giving a response that she's fine, that she's learned to deal with it in one way or shape or form. And when she has this conversation with Joseph Cannon's character, who is clearly someone who's always been there with her and always been by her side and helped her throughout these rough patches that she's gone through, but always giving her space and respecting her process, if you will. I felt like that what was missing for me is seeing her, I meant to say, and how she deals with that in an isolated moment, where she's not surrounded by anybody at all, because I felt like that was such an integral part to that character that I was expecting that we're going to get somewhere down with that character that would essentially kind of more or less close out her story, where there is a certain character arc that I thought was leading somewhere, but I felt like, at least for me personally, we didn't necessarily get with her. Not saying that there isn't a character arc for her at all. There definitely is, but I felt like the character arc that I was expecting out of her wasn't necessarily there. I'm not sure if they shot some things that probably didn't turn out as well, so they did the best they could to try to make up for that. And that might be the case here. I'm just speculating, as I have no idea what's going on. But I felt like that was something that was really missing in this movie when it came to her character. And the other thing I want to point out too does have to do with Joseph Cannon's character, because without getting into any spoilers here, you see his character come back at the end, because he's only in the film for a few minutes in the movie, and I was here in the beginning and halfway to the point of the film, and he shows up at the end. It's clearly obvious to me that he was very integral to the overall story, that there was a lot more to his character that was very impactful to the overall narrative that was left out. I don't know what it was. I'm not sure if they had shot something, again, that maybe didn't work out as well. They had to find a way to make up for that by probably keeping that long distance shot where you can kind of see him and maybe not question too much on why he's there. Who knows what the whole story is here? Because again, I'm just speculating here, but I felt like there was something missing with his character that was very, very integral to the overall narrative that we did not get. So again, there were certain beats that I started to pick up along the way that just didn't mesh well with me all that much, that I felt like was missing. I'm not going to say that we needed more time we need to add more 15 minutes. No, it's not what I'm getting. It's just, I don't think it's the case here. It's just showcasing certain sides of the character's involvement with the story to really flesh out those details. So that way, when the way the story ends along the way, you get a full understanding of their arc and how they were so integral for the overall narrative here, that I felt like was not in the movie, for at least in this case for these two characters here, that was missing, at least for me personally. And here's one thing I'm also going to point out here too. The character that Bruce Willis plays, the crime boss in this movie. Now, it's understandable for everyone who's not aware that Bruce Willis has more or less retired from acting, because it was revealed that he has been diagnosed with aphasia. I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm going to try to be very careful how I say this, because when I say this here, I'm not trying to disrespect him by any means, or am I going to try to say that he was awful? Because that's not the case at all. Unfortunately for me, the villain didn't really work all that well. The intention and the use of the character were all there, and they were put in there to work effectively for the narrative. In that respect, I think they've done a really good job, Jesse and everyone else involved. But unfortunately for me, what I felt like was missing was the strong performances that we need out of that character that unfortunately we did not get out of Bruce Willis in this film. I will be pointing out though that there are some good qualities that he did offer in terms of the performances that we know that he can deliver, that we know he has delivered in the past, I should say. But it's clearly obvious that this condition that he's been diagnosed with here definitely played a factor in his performance in this movie, because the character that he's portraying, we understand his reasons for decisions that he's making that have a severe consequences for everybody. And when you get that Greek history that John Malkovich's character was talking about, that's all pertaining to him. And it was done, I thought, well to explain that and to showcase that. But the way that, unfortunately, that Bruce Willis delivers the character's intentions, among other things too, just did not work for me at all. It was kind of dry, to be completely honest here. But again, when I'm saying this here, I'm not trying to be disrespectful to him, or am I saying that he was awful? That's not what I'm getting at. It's clearly obvious that this condition that he has here did have an effect in his performance. It's very obvious that's the case here. But there were some nice moments where you get to see some genuine character moments that did come out every once in a while, and then you're reminded this guy was an amazing actor. But again, it's clearly obvious that everyone working around him did their absolute best to try to get the best out of Bruce, and I think they've done a phenomenal job in doing the best they can to try to keep things consistent in that regard. But overall, I think that was one of the biggest things that did stick out for me, that just didn't click all that well, simply under those circumstances there. So I mean, I don't mean to be disrespectful by any means. That's not the case at all. But that's how I felt about his performance, because it just wasn't on par with everyone else's performance in that respect. But I understand the circumstances, and but again, as I said before, there are some really nice moments that Bruce Willis does deliver when it came to his character that I thought worked very well, but that was just far in between when it did occur. But for me, though, I will say that that's going to be the end of my negatives. So now let's get into my rating. I did enjoy this film quite a lot, and I was happy to go back and revisit this movie on more than one occasion, because there's something about Jesse's films that I think he brings when it comes to characters and when it comes to the layers to his story that I always find so fascinating, that I always pick out more and more each and every time that I watch his movies. And that's a consistent thing that I've come across with all his films that I thoroughly do enjoy whenever he's directing. Jesse's was one of those directors that, you know, if you give him the opportunity to do bigger things, he's going to do great things with those resources he has available to him when it comes to more time, more money, among other things as well too. And you definitely get to see that in this movie, along with Hell Hath No Fury, which I think is a film that, in my opinion, where he really showcases all his strength. And he definitely does showcase that in this movie too. But I will be honest though and say that although this is not my favorite Jesse V. Johnson film, it still has a lot of the same strong qualities that he brings to his movies that are still very much here in this film in White Elephant. But this is a movie that when it does come out on Blu-ray, which I hope it does, I will be buying it because I'm a fan of Jesse. I will always be a supporter of his movies, and he's a phenomenal director and a very, very good storyteller. And you see that in spades in this, because what you get in this movie is a fun, entertaining film with some great character depth that I hope that people can walk away from it and enjoy, and not only enjoy the film, but enjoy what the actors were able to provide there, and in turn will encourage them to check out some of their future work as well too. So for me, I would say that as far as my rating is concerned, this movie is a raise a glass. And those are my thoughts on the film. And if you have seen the movie, let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. And also make sure, if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel, make you share, like our videos, and hit the notification bell while you're down there. Follow us on our social media accounts on Instagram, New Release Wednesdays, on Facebook, Nerds Rule the World, and on Twitter at the NRW. Follow me on my social media accounts on Instagram and Twitter, Mr. Rob Medina, and on Facebook, simply just Rob Medina. And I have a show on the channel called You're So Cool with Rob Medina, and I have a social media for the show as well. On Instagram, You're So Cool with Rob Medina, and on Twitter, You're So Cool WRM. And I want to thank you all very much for joining me here today. I hope you guys enjoyed this review. Until next time, stay safe out there, and cheers.